We are back with the follow-up podcast and jumping back into Exodus 33. Well, that's where
I
you
wonder,
are.
should we cover Exodus 32 because we didn't last week?
Oh wow, that would be quite a bit.
Squeeze it all in.
I was on vacation,
Right.
Camping, all that was kind of hard to do. And then like the week before, was I sick or? I think it's been a few weeks.
It has. Yeah, there was a week. There was a week at least.
Okay.
Off. Yeah.
But we're in 33. I mean, you can talk about 32. That's fine.
Yeah.
But 33 is kind of companion with 32 because that 32 is when Moses comes down from the mountain,
Right.
finds them
Comes
doing
down,
all kinds of bad stuff,
finds the misbehavior, and then how do we recover from that?
Yeah.
It's kind of
He's brought the tablets. He's going to bring the tablets to them, and he finds them sacrificing and partying and all that kind of stuff. And then there's judgment, and then there's punishment, and there's a plague, and there's all that kind of stuff. And then that dumps us into 33, where you picked up here. And really the issue there is, how are things going to proceed in the future? So Moses has said there's going to be a problem with your sin. God's going to deal with that. God has dealt with that. But then the question is, will God go with us in the future? Is that what your summation would be?
Yeah. The question is now, after the judgment has fallen, God has withheld his presence in his communication with Moses, saying, I'm not going to go with you. I'm going to send an angel with you. And so that's the big question is, will God's presence go with his people or not?
Right.
Is it possible to be reconciled after what just happened?
To show that they're reconciled.
Yeah.
So what is the evidence of God's presence being with them? What would that be? What would that look like?
Yeah, and this is actually interesting, digging into the theme of God's presence throughout Exodus, because there's terminology that's used to describe his presence or to symbolize his presence as they're moving through the wilderness. So as they're leaving Egypt, they're following the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire, and those are representative of God's presence and leading them and all this. And then it gets interesting because I think it's about Exodus 23 or so. Right. It refers to the angel of his presence. And the idea of it is kind of God's using a messenger to show them that his presence is there with them, or mediating that in a sense. But then we get to this chapter and God is saying, I'm going to give you an angel to lead you without my presence.
Well, you're like, wasn't there an angel there the whole time?
Right.
Okay.
But so there's the real significance of it is the relationship between God and his people being reconciled or not. That is what's at stake in his presence going with them or not.
I think people can feel that way. I mean, this very much so plays over the idea of people who feel like God has left them. I mean, you have to put this into the context of, we know God is everywhere.
Right. We've talked about this with the tabernacle thing. Right. Yeah.
But that special mark, I mean, they're seeing this as a distinguishing mark for the world around us, for us ourselves to see and to know that God is there. That cloud on the tent of meeting is there. But then there's that feeling of separate. I mean, during the whole time Moses was up on the mountains for 40 days and 40 nights, did they feel separated from him? And that's why they went into the worship of the golden calf?
For some reason, I had always envisioned that the mountain still had smoke on top of it.
Yeah.
And still had thunder. And they had grown so accustomed to that it was no problem for them to turn after other
so
things.
Maybe some sort of over-familiarity with God.
Too comfortable with the idea. Yeah.
I've always wondered if that is the reason why mankind is on earth rather than in heaven. Okay? Because over familiarity with the holy, it becomes it becomes something that's trivial.
Yeah. You tend to lose the reverence for the thing. The more, and this is actually a danger for us as pastors, because we interact so regularly with the Bible, with prayer, and all of these things that are, really touch points with our relationship with God are so frequent and a part of our job.
Right.
That there's actually the risk that we could lose that sense of reverence for God and the things of God just in carrying out our everyday duties. It was
we see that.
It was Paul Tripp's book Dangerous Calling, where he talked about that a lot.
No doubt.
The idea of familiarity and becoming blind.
Well, being a pastor or being a church leader of any stripe, I think it bears that over familiarity with the holy.
Yeah.
Even pastors' kids.
Oh, sure. That's another good example, because you grew up with it, or anybody who grew up in church, you grew up with it, becomes very ordinary. Yeah. And you have the possibility of losing the reverence.
Right.
For just how miraculous it is that God's speaking with people, leading them, and doing things.
You're a pastor's kid, and I am a pastor's kid as well. Also, my dad was a counselor, or is a counselor. But he was also a pastor for a time, and there was that temptation to see things that are holy as mundane. And
mundane is a good.
It really came to a come to Jesus moment, where I realized that just because you're a good person, just because you come from a good family or had good cultural upbringing, or any of those things, where you're respectful, you're kind, you're humble, all those things that are normal in that society, and you come to think, well, that's just who I am, rather than say, no, there's so much more that God could do through me. I still need a Savior.
Yeah, that's one of the things that the author is highlighting by putting this little tent of meeting parentheses in the middle of this. Because some scholars will look at this and be like, why is this tent of meeting clause in the middle of the chapter? It feels so out of place, because it's not part of the story that's being told. And so they'll say, oh, another author wrote it, or whatever. They make try and make up an explanation. But it's really as simple as the tent of meeting explanation here is to explain why God's presence is important.
Sure.
Why is it important that we have his presence or not? Is because Moses goes to the presence of God for direction and for judgment, and for, every time he's going to hear from God about where to go, it's the presence of God that's enabling him to do that. It's about communion with
that whole
God.
Passage of them seeing Moses go into the tent of meeting, seeing a cloud descend by the door, knowing what's going on, and everybody stood in their tent and worshipped.
And watched at a distance.
Right. Yeah. And so they hadn't had that for 40 days, but they knew the value of it. Yep. Sure.
Yeah, and a huge contrast between that and God eventually moving his tabernacle right into the middle of the camp. Yeah. That's coming too. They're going to build that. So there's this kind of God's meeting with them outside the camp, but he wants to be right in the middle. Sure. It's a big thing too.
So they had taken, I made the point in 32 that worship had been described to them in broad terms before that, rules and what the law would be, what the agreement and the covenant would be. And then they took worship and they went in a totally different direction. Worshiping the calf, the image of the calf, and that was their expression of worship. They had messed up worship itself. By corrupting it. And then God is here fixing that, or having a conversation about it. It's not your ornamentations, it's not your making a pretty thing to symbolize me or any of those things. That's off the table. It's really because they use that as license to just do the awful thing, any awful thing they felt like doing.
It could have very much been connected.
And then this is redeeming worship with or the connection between them, and it comes off sounding like God saying, "Well, I'm going to take my presence from you, just to see their reaction, just to see, I'm playing a game. Am I going to do this? Am I going to do that?" Kind of thing.
Is this a negotiation?
Right?
Is it? Yeah. Then you get that impression when you're reading it. And it almost feels like Moses is having to convince God or argue with God to change God's mind about that. That's how you first feel when you're reading it. But that's not what's going on here. because we have a couple indications in the text, like the fact that God says, I will show mercy on whoever I'm going to show mercy to and compassion on. So it's God's prerogative to do that, to show mercy or not, and all of that. But by having that conversation between God and Moses and recording it, is emphasizing the fact of just how critical God's presence is and what it would mean to lose it. So it's putting on display, this is not just a minor offense, this is a serious offense. Sin, we tend to minimize it. We think, you know, I stole this little that, or I lied about this or that and it didn't hurt anybody. But in reality, sin fractures the relationship with God, which is a really big deal.
So if God had made a statement like that, and then not done anything about it, they would come under the impression of, well, we can push God that far. How much further? You know, where you see this with parenting, right?
True.
Kids learn, you know, if I ask 4 times and the parent goes, well, all right, I'll give it to you. Then they've just learned the metric of, oh, it requires 4 times asking. And then, so the next time they'll get to that 4 times and you go, well, I'm going to really stick to my guns. And you wait till the 8th time, you've just trained them to ask you 8 times. And then so forth and so on it goes.
Or another question is, or what? Or what? You know, like, no other gods before me. Okay. Or what? What happens if I do? That's the question that the kid who wants to push the boundaries is going to ask. What happens if I do encroach on that line? Where's the consequences? And that's what God is really painting that picture in this conversation with Moses, is that there are consequences.
And they're real, and they're going to come to fruition.
And it's going to affect your kids and your grandkids and even eternally. All of those. Because their decision, if God were to leave them, you know, his presence were to leave them, that's not just me and my family, that's generational impact. Well,
I mean, you had the Levites going through and killing some of the people, and then a plague that extended that range even further. You think about it, there were probably family lines that ended right there. And it did not extend into going into the promised land and being a part of the ongoing story. I mean, there was probably some branches that were pruned. And later on, in like Deuteronomy and such, we'll see even more branches are pruned.
And numbers. A lot of that too.
Okay. So the concept of being stiff-necked. Some people take pride in being stubborn, right?
We have hymns written about that.
Really? I hadn't thought of hymns.
I shall not be moved. You've heard the hymn, the tree planted by the water, I will not be moved.
Well, I mean, that's about being faithful, right?
But you can take it wrong if you want.
And there are some people who literally live by, I will not be moved. Based on, if I move, if I change, I show that I was wrong. Right? But if I stick to my guns and I refuse to see anything differently than I have always seen it, then no one can say, aha, look, they finally realized that they were wrong.
The concept of having to admit you were wrong. And that's not easy to do. Like, you gotta come to grip with reality. Then you gotta be humble enough to say it to someone else. We get set in our ways, and we kind of have like this pride from like cold dead hands mentality about our whatever it is. I'll change my mind when the cows come home, or when a very hot dark place freezes over. Paint the picture. But it's,
well, what is that? And what does it take to get to the point where God calls you stiff-necked? I mean, that.
There's a few things that kind of come to mind describing that process. So, like in Hebrews, I remember it says, you know, beware, brothers, lest your hearts become hardened through the deceitfulness of sin. And the idea is kind of that things are soft and moldable, but eventually they may reach a point where they can no longer be shaped as far as your heart goes, and your, you know, willingness to grow and change before God. And sin has a tendency of blinding you to, seeing what God's trying to do in your life, and then you fall into that habit, repeat it, return to it, and it solidifies.
Yeah.
Yeah, and God describes his people in these terms a bunch of places where like I think of Ezekiel, where he describes the people having a stony heart that he's going to have to replace with a heart of flesh.
Sure.
Kind of I don't know if it said transplant, but that's the idea that it's stuck in my mind.
I will remove and I will put in, that idea. Okay.
Yeah.
So when God sees...
It's kind of like resisting what he's trying to do.
Okay.
You get to a point where, or imagine the donkey that wants to go its own way, kind of a thing.
Okay.
Where God's trying to lead you, guide you, change your direction, move you over here.
Right.
And you keep going the other way.
Have you ever ridden a donkey or a horse or something like that?
A horse, stubborn? Yeah, but they were so tame that it doesn't count. Yeah.
No. Most horses want to go where you pull them.
Right. Yeah.
I have had an experience with a burro.
Yeah.
We did a living nativity scene in New Orleans.
In a church?
No.
Okay.
In a city park.
Okay, a little better. Yeah.
Yeah. We had a stable built. And we had all these animals and all that, but we had a burro. No, we had a burro. We also had a calf. Yeah. And this calf that we had, we did it in the churchyard out by the street. We did this living nativity scene. We had this calf, and the calf did not want to go where you wanted to lead it. So you pull on the rope, and it would start backing up in the opposite direction. So we figured out if we pull it where we don't want it to go, it will back up in the direction we
You have to drive it backwards.
Exactly.
Reverse psychology on a cow.
Totally. Yeah. Had to. So we're pulling this calf, and it's going, nope.
Yeah.
Nope. And it's going exactly where we want it to go.
That's funny.
I think sometimes God uses our stubbornness to back us into the corners that we find ourselves in.
Yeah. I suppose that would be the merciful the mercy of God, that we would accidentally, by trying to be stubborn, end up in the right place.
Yeah. That doesn't make you any more right in your resisting. It's just you finally get to the place where you're boxed in enough that you go, why am I hanging on to being right when what God has designed is so much better?
Yeah, I think of Saul on the road to Damascus scenario, where Jesus is speaking to him from heaven saying, it's awfully hard for you to kick against these goads that I'm pushing you with. And he's blinded in that moment and realizes who he's messing with.
Yep.
And then he turns and changes. So there's maybe, depending on how hard your heart gets, there may be a moment of crisis that comes and changes that.
Hey. Yeah. Well, looks like Ruben's here to mow the lawn. All right.
Cool.
Hey, man. There's a lot there in terms of what being stiff-necked does to relationship with God and each other and all that kind of stuff. So, but that a lot of this, and don't read Exodus 33 and don't avoid seeing yourself, because
that's true. Yeah.
The only thing, those silly Israelites being not doing wise things, but for the grace of God, you.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And in terms of the fact that they were willing to shape their own idea of how things should be and worship, and we're just as vulnerable to that.
Yeah.
We sometimes you have this statement made, I couldn't worship a God who, and then whatever theological proposition you're not willing to accept. And so we tend to kind of take a scalpel to the idea of God and shape it how we think it should be, and then say, this is God. And that's no different than these people when we do that, when we refuse to see him not for who we want him to be or think he is, but for who he says he is.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wanting to make God at least manageable.
Yeah.
I mean,
Nate-shaped. I want this Nate-shaped
people
God
often avoid saying,
Yeah.
I'm making God in my own image.
Yeah.
They avoid saying that. But they like something that is within their grasp or control. Like the Israelites were happy with a calf, a golden calf.
We can relate to that.
I can relate to that.
Yeah.
I can pick up a calf. I can pet a calf. I can slaughter a calf. I can let a calf grow. You know, all those things. Yep. They could get a handle on that. But a God who made you, who knows you better than you know yourself, that has the ability to say, yep. My child, this is what is right. You will come to understand it by doing it. You know, that kind of thing is just, it assaults all aspects of your pride to hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's more than just ideas about God. It is ideas about right and wrong too.
Right.
That will say, well, I wouldn't allow this, but I would allow that. What does God say is right and wrong?
Right.
Yeah.
And having something higher than your opinion.
Yeah. We want it to be within our control or not to step on my boundary of what, that hurts. Don't step there.
Yeah. Excuse me. So God is saying, I'm not going to go with you. If I do go with you for an instant, I'm going to break out and just, it's all over. You know? And I don't want that to happen. So I'm going to hang back and let you go ahead. And then Moses intercedes. Yeah. So talk about why that works. Why that? What's on display through that? I guess kind of more where I'm going.
Well, just looking at context, the previous chapters, we've had the descriptions of the tabernacle and the priests and all of that whole concept of intercession in the priesthood being described in the law. And now it's being played out in real life. Moses is actually having to do it.
Okay.
Having to, plead before God on behalf of the people. And also, there's also this where God's communicating back to them. It's there. Moses is doing he's doing the work of, and we don't think of this because we're very individualized, in our approach of doing business and these kinds of things. But he is acting as a representative in here.
Okay.
In his,
a representative for the nation. So he's actually having a conversation with God as if the nation is speaking through him.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And it is, but it's on their behalf because God says, I'm willing to relate to Moses, but I'm not willing to relate to these people. It's kind of the vibe that you get there from the description. But yeah, so Moses is recalling God's promises. So it's based on God's promises that he's made. It's based on God's character and who God is. Those are the basis by which Moses can intercede on their behalf.
So is he as much saying this to God as he is saying it to the people? The reason why you have mercy is because God has these promises. God has this character. God is this way. That's why the mercy is
absolutely, because in the one hand it's recorded. Well, let's say it this way: this conversation happened between God and Moses, and then does it extend to the people? Yes, because it's recorded for them to be aware that the conversation happened.
Yeah, so
it does. It does preach both ways. Yeah,
yeah. So they're hearing this, seeing this, and then they're seeing God act, and that's. That's got to be something that you can really hold on. It's not the scenario of the parental unit giving away, or saying there won't be justice, there won't be results. It's saying there are results, but there is also mercy at my choosing, and there will be punishment at my choosing. He's already had that with the Levites going in, with the plague and whatnot, and there would be things that come after. And in fact, the whole story of God's relationship to Israel, all the way through, probably even to the present day, of them straying, God disciplining, them coming back, those kinds of things happen. I mean, all the way down to the exiles that occur are all, who was it we were talking about? A prophet. And he was saying, no, where were we? We were reading together about a prophet who says, no, I think it's New Testament, a prophet who says,
it'd have to be like, it was
I have so many things
First
jumbled
and
up.
Second Peter, was it in there? Because
Might have been.
kind of going through
We were kind of talking about those. Yeah. Well, the idea that there were false people who saying God will never judge Israel.
Second Peter chapter 2.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
okay.
Definitely.
God will never punish Israel, and he's saying, no, it's actually, you can read Scripture. God will punish
Here
Israel.
are the examples where God punished the ungodly.
Yeah,
yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, that's Second Peter 2. That's where it came from.
That's where we're talking. Okay.
Yeah.
But no, and those just show God's parental discipline, justice, mercy, all of that functioning, and using that to grow, develop, protect, all the things of basically raising Israel from being a non-people to being a people with a land and a promise.
Yeah, and the intercession part of this is more than just, kind of, what would you say, like, I would like the circumstances to change, so I'll go ask if they can change. It's more than just that. It is, God, we have seen who you are and what you've done, and we want to see what you're going to do.
Yeah.
Because Moses follows it all up with, show me. How can I know that your presence is going to go with us?
Okay.
Show me who you are.
Right.
And that's the
cleft in the rock kind of scenario.
Yeah, so intercession is not about, I just need someone else to deal with God for me, and I can just forget it. It's actually, the intercession bit is, and the mediation of that is, the connection with God is actually happening through that. So it's not isolated or distant. We think of like, there's a barrier between, but the mediator actually allows you to cross that barrier in a sense. And Moses is going to do that, not to tell the future part of the story of how it goes. Okay. But it will.
All right.
Yeah.
And so through this, the people are forgiven. You're saying they're forgiven through the mediation, the bringing of them. But then there's the entering into the cleansing and the repentance that goes with instituting everything.
Yeah.
Is that what we're talking about?
We see the repentance happening at the beginning of the chapter where the people are mourning and they're taking off their ornaments and they're aware of the wrong that they did. And then the explanation of God's conversation with Moses is like emphasizing, just so that we know how serious that wrong is. And then the forgiveness that comes after that is demonstrated on the basis of God's mercy, and it was accessed by Moses' mediation, intercession with them, and it's conveyed through his God's display of his glory to his people.
So we know that the future holds them not sticking with it.
Oh, in time? Yeah. A bunch more of them are going to fall away.
Okay.
Yeah, that's true.
So if God is here saying, I'm resistant to going with you, okay, I will go with you, here's how repentance happens, he's setting up a pattern that will be carried out in all those future interactions when people will fall away again. I mean, you got fiery serpents, you got earthquakes, the earth opening up, you've got raiding bands, you got all kinds of things that come at them.
A bunch of stuff like that does happen. Yeah, and it's not to say that God, each of those times, is doubling back on his promise and saying, now I'm not going to do it. Well, now I am. Now I'm not. Now, you could read the story that way.
Right.
But that's not what he's doing. He's still going to keep his promise in the long run. But people have a choice whether or not they're going to be a part of that.
True.
They can decide to go off over here into, murmur land and I'm my own priest prophet land and every other, direction that they went.
Okay.
So
a big thing here at the end is this whole Moses wants to see the glory of God. And God says, not my face. No one has seen my face. you know? And then he does this whole cleft, put him in the cleft of the rock, pass by, you can see my back.
Yeah.
Does God have a face? Does God have a back? Does God have a hand to cover?
Oh, that is a point.
So,
that is a point that needs
how does that
to
work?
be drawn out. Yeah. So, and that's an interesting language that's used there. The idea of his face, because every time it's mentioned his presence thus far in the chapter, the idea of presence is before the face of a person.
Okay.
So the concept of the face is in the presence, that we're having a face-to-face kind of a conversation.
Right.
And that's like conveyed in that language. And
so you had this right up here with verse 11. Thus the Lord used to speak with Moses face to face.
Right. So it feels like a contradiction when you first read it.
Yeah,
like, wait, I thought he had a face-to-face conversation and now he can't see his face.
Right.
But the concept of it, again, the presence of God is that personal relationship. But then if you were to say, I want to actually see God, I want to actually be exposed to his full glory, that's not humanly possible. And that's why God is having to hide Moses in between some rocks.
So full glory. Yeah. That's full uniqueness, full wonder, full aspect of all that God is. That being
aspects of all that God is a good way to put that.
All right. See, because you said in your sermon, Jesus is seeing God.
Yes.
So
all of God's glory is displayed in who Jesus is.
Okay.
Yep. How does this work?
Yeah.
Let's get into this. Okay.
Right.
Before we go into there,
right.
Let's deal with the whole hand and face.
Okay. All right.
Okay. So this is how the Bible describes God in a way that we can understand God, because we don't actually have a way to conceive of God in our mind as far as these concepts of who he is. So the idea you'll see things about God having ears and eyes and hands and all this stuff. Does God have a body
even wings
just like us?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, it's not that he has all of these physical body parts.
Yeah.
These are descriptions for us to be able to relate to the actions or attitudes that God is taking in the story. So if we didn't describe God as, I'm going to cover you with my hand, what would we describe him as covering with? We can't think of it. Yeah. So that's the visual that we can think of.
Something that physically is opaque to light that came between you and he. Something like
So God's using human expression to be able to relate to us.
I see.
And he does that all over the Bible.
Absolutely.
You'll run into that all over the Bible. So that's how we're able to, you can't see my face, but you can, and all of that. Okay. All of that explanation there. And then how does God have body parts and how does that work? Okay, he doesn't actually have those body parts like physically, like we would think of them.
He's not bound to that. He can take that form if he chooses or what have you.
Sure.
So.
Yep. So then with Jesus, how is the glory of God able to be on display for people to see in Jesus and not be consumed? How is that possible? And that is like sometimes you'll see it in the New Testament described as his flesh is like a veil.
Okay.
And so, like, think of the tabernacle. You've got the Holy of Holies where nobody can go, and there's a veil covering that thing.
Right.
And so, even though the glory is all there, there's a veil enabling, priests to go in and out without blood and incense and all the stuff that they have to do otherwise. So that's one way to think of it. But it's not any less true in the Exodus story. So you have the pillar of the cloud.
Sure.
How is God's glory able to be displayed to them in that without them being consumed? And it's
because the cloud itself is
the cloud itself is. And so God actually has to. This is through the whole Pentateuch. God is actually having to relate to his people through mediators all the time.
Sure.
God himself doesn't come down, full glory, full display, and give somebody a message.
Yeah. Because
they would be consumed. He sends an angel to do that. And so that's where you have the angel of the Lord, and all of this is the idea of God's work and his revelation having to be mediated through messengers and this kind of a thing. So that's all related to that concept. And so with Jesus, God puts his glory on a display in a way that we can see it, where before we couldn't. And
in a way, it's still a limited perception of God because of the veil of flesh that Jesus possesses.
Yeah.
But it is a different aspect or view than what had been seen before in terms of man's experience with God through the ages. Jesus was a unique expression of that in his lifetime.
You might think of it also as like infrared light and infrared cameras. You can't see infrared light. Even though it's there, you cannot see it. You have to have something to translate that for you to be able to see it.
A device.
So if you have like a night vision or something, it uses infrared light to be able to see in the dark, but it has to use real light for you to actually see it.
Right.
Because you can't see
the
it.
monitor or the viewfinder, transitions it to a spectrum that you can't see.
Yep. So you can kind of think of God that way also, as a spectrum that we totally can't see, and that he enables us to see.
Yeah, we see so little. I mean, we know the electromagnetic spectrum is so broad, but yet visible light is just that tiny chunk.
Right.
And if we could see all of it, the world wouldn't make sense.
Probably not.
It'd just be a blur of what,
You can imagine if you could see radio waves.
I know. That'd be like flying everywhere. Yeah. I got that.
Yeah.
Okay. So I've asked all my questions. What is the question that we're not asking about this passage that we should be? Borrowing another podcast is a final question.
Yeah.
Trigonometry.
Yeah. I actually don't remember that question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's right, though. The question that we're not asking about this that we should be, well, I mean, there were some questions that I answered on Sunday that we didn't answer here today, and those would be, related to how we can actually be forgiven and how we can actually, have the presence of God. How does a Christian, or how do one of us today access any of this presence and forgiveness that God has? What's
your summation of how a believer who feels distance rejoins or revitalizes all of that? How does that happen?
This was in my head as we're describing this interaction between Moses and God, and what was in my head was the New Testament passages where it says, don't grieve the Holy Spirit with whom you're sealed to the day of redemption. And like I think even in Thessalonians, don't quench the Spirit. So there is this sense in which a believer could feel that fractured relationship with God through the way that they're living their life. They could experience what would feel like the absence of God's presence, even though his presence is there all along. Yeah. Even though he doesn't leave, they could still feel it. Yeah. And they could still be in the middle of that conversation of, do you want my presence here or not? And so what does that believer do? I think the pattern of this text is something we could follow. Put off your own way of doing things, turn to God, humble yourself before him, admit you were wrong, and then come to God through Christ and receive forgiveness because he promised he would. Yeah. Because of who he is, that he is merciful. And I don't think it's any different than the way they are facing it there.
I think we can have a very sweet time with the Lord, feeling convicted, feeling something is off, feeling like you've strayed, So you're walking along, you're having a time with the Lord, and then you just say, I'm going to make this choice over here, absent the leading of God, and I'm going to go do this. And then you just feel like you've stepped out into the cold, all right? But I think just like a child who steps out into the cold for a second and their dad says, hey, get back in here, you'll catch your death, kind of thing. And you feel the love and the care of God that calls you back, right? But there are people who step out in the cold, get that call back, and they go, no, I know I'm on the right path, and they just keep going, till you're dropping in the snow and you're freezing, and hypothermia and all that is starting to set in, and then there's a rescue operation, and then there's a thawing out period. But then there may be some amputation due to frostbite.
Consequences.
But don't take the analogy too far. But the longer you persist in being stiff-necked, the harder the return is, and the more like a big decision it is to make that kind of return versus a little child who just steps out and comes back.
Yeah, that's true. It becomes increasingly more awkward to admit you're wrong.
Yeah.
The longer you've been doing it.
Yeah.
Because the sunk cost fallacy. I've been doing it this way forever. Can't change now.
Yeah.
That's definitely. I could see that being a mentality that people wrestle with.
Right.
Even though it doesn't have to be that way, because think of the story of the prodigal son. Sort of the idea is like, what took so long for you to come back?
Right.
Like, why did you have to go all the way down to eating, pig food?
Pig food. Yeah.
To decide to come home.
Yeah.
Where it took time for the guy to come to his senses and realize where he is and where he came from.
Well, there is the sunk cost fallacy. I mean, we've hit on that a couple of times, but it's the forgiveness is sweet. I think I want to emphasize that side of it. Yeah, people imagine that saying I was wrong is going to just tear me apart. My enemies are going to laugh at me. Everybody's going to shake their heads at me. All that kind of, and you're imagining that. What I would say is people imagine the sweetness of falling into a loving Father's arms. Not the vengeful father you may have grown up with or whatever, but a loving Father's arms. I get this with my kids, sometimes one of them will do something and everybody else knows the rules and they're saying, you shouldn't do that, Dad's going to be mad and all this kind of stuff. And so when I call them back to repentance, my first thing is to say, all of you others, be quiet. You're parenting without a license. That's the way I put it.
Yeah.
This is my job, right?
Yeah. That's true.
And so I take them in and I become their protector at that moment. That's, if we had that image of coming back after a time away, I think we would see getting forgiveness, coming back to the Lord, come to Jesus moment, whatever you want to call it, as the sweetest thing the soul can experience, or one of the sweetest things.
Sure. Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. In terms of the presence of God, in terms of He's now leading in your life, He's guiding your decisions, like all of the benefits that come with who He is and being right with God, the peace that's there. He says, you'll have my presence and I'll give you rest in this text. The rest that's there.
Yeah.
I mean, every kind of relief from whatever you've been running from that's found with God. Why wouldn't you turn around and come back?
Yeah.
Yeah, it blows my mind. You'd have to be pretty stiff-necked not to. Yeah.
And yet, so many are.
Yeah.
All right. So you brought out your last questions, my last questions. I think we're set here?
Yeah.
All right.
There's always one more, but we'll save some for next week.
Okay. Yeah. And we're hoping if you have any questions, that you'll send them in, put them in the comments on the sermon video that comes out each. This way we have it. We don't really publish the sermon video until later, but if you had a question,
anywhere you can
email it in. Anyway. After a Sunday sermon, send it in, and we'll try to address it here. Thanks for all the kind comments that we've had so far. I guess that's all from us.
All right.
Follow-up podcast.
Yeah.